Today I'm reacting to your Monday Night Raw Hot Takes. Hot Takes is a weekly video series where I give you all a platform to be able to voice your thoughts, whether those are good thoughts, bad thoughts, or everything in between about the world of professional wrestling. So if you'd like to be featured in the next episode of Hot Takes, make sure that you're following me over on X because I ask for your hot takes there after every episode of Raw, SmackDown, and every single WWE Premium Live event. Which means, yes, we will be doing an episode of Hot Takes immediately after Survivor Series War Games. By the way, if you are looking for my full review of this particular episode of Monday Night Raw, it's already up and available over on patreon.com/SantiZap. Over there, we upload the Raw reviews, SmackDown reviews, and a whole bunch of other videos and series that we can never upload here on YouTube because YouTube would just block them due to copyright because we use real footage over there. So go check it out. Link in the description, link in the pinned comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I am incredibly confident that you are going to fall in love with this YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. All right, let's get to it. Can we admit that ever since Brock Lesnar has returned, that he's been entertaining in all of the wrong ways? Listen, this episode of Monday Night Raw, by most accounts, was a pretty okay episode of Monday Night Raw. Nothing particularly memorable happened on this episode. And then Brock Lesnar decided to go out there, slip, fall on his ass, and do a backwards roll and put his hat on Braun Breaker. And instantly it made this one of my single favorite episodes of Monday Night Raw because that was genuinely one of the funniest things that I've ever seen happen on live TV. But I do get where you're coming from. He has been entertaining for all of the wrong reasons because the most entertaining things that Brock Lesnar has done since his return has been falling on live TV and ripping his pants and showing his ass to the entire world. Because when it comes to the wrestling side of things, the only thing that we've gotten thus far is the very controversial, to say the least, match at WrestlePalooza where he ate John Cena alive in front of the Make-A-Wish kids. And one of the things that I said when Brock Lesnar ripped his pants was that this was arguably one of the worst things that could have happened going into Brock Lesnar's feud because it made Brock Lesnar seem human and somewhat funny and charismatic. And the exact same thing is happening here because Brock Lesnar played this off like a G. He came off very funny, very charismatic, played into the joke, and still came out looking like a complete badass that nobody wants to mess with, which I just don't think is the message that WWE wants to convey about this heel team going into Survivor Series War Games. I think they wanted a serious, scary, unstoppable onslaught of a team, and they have that mostly, but now they have a funny, charismatic Brock Lesnar that's off the back of falling on his ass and everybody's laughing and pointing, but he's just playing it off and being all cool and badass about it. Seriously, the only person genuinely that I think can survive ripping his pants on live TV and falling on his ass is Brock Lesnar. That is the only man that can make all of this work. Braun needs to keep a close eye on Brock and Heyman on Saturday. They're acting how they usually were in the 2010s, and I have a feeling Brock is turning on Team Vision at War Games. If this happens, this is the only way I see them losing. Also, this is a setup for their future feud. I think your brain is on the right track. I'm also seeing something happening at War Games between Braun Breaker and Brock Lesnar to create and incite their feud, maybe going into WrestleMania. But I don't think it's Brock Lesnar turning on his team. I think, if anything, it would be Braun Breaker turning on Brock Lesnar. Maybe the heels are celebrating, they've won, and amidst the celebration, Braun Breaker takes out Brock Lesnar with a spear. To me, that's more likely to be the case, considering the big thing that Braun Breaker did earlier this year was take out the main eventer, leader of the Vision, with a spear amidst a celebration in Seth Rollins. And we've all sort of been waiting for that next thing for Braun Breaker ever since he did that. It feels like WWE is kind of cooled down on him ever since they made Braun Breaker make that big decision to take out Seth Rollins and kick him out of the Vision. I think we need something to re-spark this push for Braun Breaker, and I think Braun Breaker taking out Brock Lesnar is a much better way to do it than Brock Lesnar taking out Braun Breaker. It is very difficult to talk about this team because it's all Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and Brock Lesnar. It's getting really hard. I'm so glad that the likes of Ivy Nile and Roxanne Perez are starting to get opportunities for the women's Intercontinental title. I wish it would have happened sooner, especially with Ivy, but better late than never. Okay, so one of the things that I said when Maxine Dupree won the Intercontinental Championship was that I was both optimistic and pessimistic. I was pessimistic because I was concerned that them putting the title on somebody that's kind of like in the lower mid-card of things, like a Maxine Dupree, would just sort of guide WWE down the path of doing the same thing with the Women's Intercontinental Championship that they've done with the Women's US Championship, which is to not feature it and basically bury the entire division. Luckily, the optimistic side of me said that maybe this gives us an opportunity to feature more talent that typically wouldn't have gotten an opportunity to be able to share screen time alongside somebody like a Becky Lynch. And I name dropped some of these people like Roxanne Perez, like Ivy Nile, and both of them got screen time with Maxine Dupree. Both of them are being teased to be next up at the Women's Intercontinental Championship. And ladies and gentlemen, bang, that's exactly what we need out of a Maxine Dupree Intercontinental Championship run. This is exactly what you should demand as fans, and I'm so happy to see, at least at first glance from the outside looking in, that it seems to be the course that they're going towards, because it opens the door for so many people that have never really gotten an opportunity before, and maybe some legends, low-key legends like Natalya, that can kind of reinsert themselves back into relevancy with the Intercontinental Championship picture. I think this is ultimately, if this is the path they continue to go down towards, this is going to be a good thing for obviously the division, but also the fans. The match between Gunther and Carmelo Hayes was brilliant. Between the in-ring grabs and them convincing us that Melo was going to win via countout, this was easily the highlight of the night. If only Melo hit that DDT on the apron. Regardless, he continues building momentum. Okay, so one of the things that I said to myself and to my live stream as we were going into this match was, Santi, you are not going to develop this hope and aspiration that Carmelo Hayes is going to win. You're going to go into this and you're going to be very clear-minded and you're going to believe that Gunther is going to win, because if you don't, you're just going to be disappointed. Stop believing that there's any chance that Carmelo Hayes is going to win. But in classic WWE fashion, they take something that you shouldn't be believing in and then in the midst of the match make you believe in it, and it worked. Hook, line, and sinker. I started to believe that Carmelo Hayes was actually going to win this thing when they started doing the callback to the finish with Bronson Reed. Not only that, but the callback to how Gunther lost via countout to Chad Gable last year when he got thrown over the barricade. I got sold. I got married to the idea of Carmelo Hayes winning this match so that he could go on and face John Cena, only for WWE to rip my heart out. And I have to give kudos to both Gunther and Carmelo Hayes for telling such a wonderful roller coaster of a story in the ring to make me go from not believing in a guy to fully believing in a guy to being completely devastated when that guy isn't able to overcome the hill and the mountain. It was a brilliantly told in-ring story. So kudos to everybody. Kudos to WWE for choreographing that match. And obviously kudos to Carmelo Hayes and Gunther, who put on an absolute slobber knocker. I am still heartbroken that Carmelo Hayes did not win. I wonder for which championship Roman Reigns is going to compete at for WrestleMania 42. This is the question of all questions. I think that this is, to me, the biggest thing that happened on this episode of Monday Night Raw. Roman Reigns making his intentions somewhat clear, not entirely clear, that he's going to be gunning after one of the world championships without exactly telling us which one, telling the viewers and the two champions to figure out what he meant, because we don't really know. But I think we can start to deduce, and at the very minimum, start to try and narrow down who the better option is. If you've been a long-time viewer of this channel, you know that I'm a big believer in just doing the match if it's available, to not push things off, because you never know that something might come up, that you might not be able to do that match further down the line. I present to thee Roman Reigns versus The Rock as the prime example of this. They could have done it at 39. They didn't. They pushed it up to 40. Didn't work at 40 because of the booking and everything else that was going on. And then they weren't able to do it at 41. And here we are years later, still with no Roman Reigns versus The Rock. Right now, when I look at both matches for Roman Reigns that are available, if it's him versus Cody, we've seen it. We've done it. Roman Reigns versus CM Punk in a singles match at WrestleMania for a world title, that we haven't seen. So to that I say, if it's available, don't overthink it. Just do it. Pull the trigger on it, because you never know with Roman Reigns if he's going to be available for next year's WrestleMania. You don't know what kind of injuries might come about, like we had with CM Punk's tricep injury. You just simply never know. If the match is there, if it's available, just do it. So I think I've made myself pretty clear. I think he should be going after CM Punk, and I actually think he's going to do it by winning the Royal Rumble, which I know is going to make a lot of people groan. I don't hate the idea of Roman versus Cody again. Both of their matches were really good. I think that it warrants at some point doing the trilogy at WrestleMania, like The Rock and Stone Cold ultimately were able to finish off their trilogy of matches at WrestleMania 19. But I think, right, like I said, right now, the other dream match is available. Do that other dream match, because this one we've already done twice. It's pretty disappointing the way that Stephanie and Nikki are being treated. They couldn't even carve out 10 minutes this week or last week of time for one of the only 4 matches of their PLE involving their women's world champion and a Hall of Famer. I understand Stephanie's run is going to be rocky because she wasn't even supposed to be champion right now, but they could have at least given them some time to work with. Nikki turning heel has been the only thing that's happened in this quote storyline. I can't really defend this, right? I do believe that this is about as surface level of a storyline going into a PLE as it gets. We have our champion, we have a heel. Hey, this heel turned on the champion to become a heel. Hey, that's good enough. Let's just throw them together into a match at a PLE. I don't think that by any regards this has been a well-built match. I do think it is a necessary match. I don't think it's a good idea to keep your champion Stephanie Vaquette on ice for so long without having a proper championship feud, because if you think about it, she hasn't really had one. She won the championship at WrestlePalooza, and then after that it was the build-up to Crown Jewel, and then now it's the build-up to this. Like, it's now been like a handful of months since she's been champion. You couldn't really leave her off of the card, even if it means, you know, going up against a Nikki Bella feud that's undercooked, underbaked, and not particularly the most interesting. I think it's a situation of something is better than nothing, considering all of the people that we want Stephanie to have matches with and feuds with are busy right now in women's war games. So I think right now it's just a little bit of a war of attrition. We need patience. We need endurance at this point. We just sort of need to survive through this so that come the new year, maybe here towards the end of the year, all of the women that are available post war games, all of a sudden start to encircle the women's world champion Stephanie Vaquette and start to give us more interesting feuds, more interesting narratives and matches. Do I wish that they had done something of a little bit more substance, something a bit meatier, something with more time to develop, as you said, like they've lacked time? Yeah, obviously, absolutely. But I do weirdly think that we're in a situation of beggars can't be choosers. Like, for God's sake, man, we're going back-to-back episodes of WWE programming, Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown with no women's matches, like, which is just a travesty. It's a problem. That should not be happening. So I'm at the very least happy that we're going to get a singles women's match on this card. Let's hope Penta's injury is not serious and wishing him a speedy recovery. Obviously, every injury to me is a heartbreaking affair. I never want to see anybody get injured. But for me personally, I've become very, very attached to Penta. And this one absolutely breaks my heart. It breaks my soul to see, because Penta has been such a workhorse on Monday Night Raw. I don't have the stats or the numbers in front of me, but I dare say that he's probably had the most men's matches on Monday Night Raw this year since debuting shortly after the debut of Raw Netflix. He's been there week in, week out, tag matches, singles matches, 6-man tag matches, never-ending feud with the Judgment Day. Doesn't matter. Penta is there to deliver, and now we're going to be losing one of the best assets, one of the most consistently good assets that Monday Night Raw has to this injury, and that's really unfortunate. On top of that, I really thought that they were setting up Penta to have a big 2026 here, ending it with this reunion of the Lucha Brothers to go up against Dominic Mysterio and El Grande Americano in AAA on December 20th. That's probably not going to happen, and I was envisioning that after that match, it was probably going to be Penta and Dominic fighting for the AAA Mega Campeonato. Absolutely devastating. This also like damages the overall impact and aura and talent pool of the Last Time Is Now tournament as well, because, you know, I'm gonna be honest, like Gunther versus Solo Sikoa just is significantly less appealing than what would have been a dream match of Penta versus Gunther. Speedy recovery to Penta. We don't know any information as of the making of this video. We don't know like what the injury really is, what the severity of the injury is. I have fingers crossed that it's nothing but like all of the best case scenarios, because I want Penta for Royal Rumble, for Elimination Chamber, for WrestleMania, and it would be devastating to miss him for all of those shows. Why do they keep cutting it off? How are we supposed to make War Games predictions if we don't see who is standing on top after the brawl? Okay, so I said this in the Raw review over on patreon.com/SantiZam. Why are we cutting things off during the brawl? We're on Netflix. There's no 10 p.m. news that needs to come on. We don't need to stop this because the next episode of Degrassi is about to come on. I don't get it. We are on Netflix. There shouldn't be an end to this. Ended when you should. The brawl started, and then 3 seconds later, the episode ended. And I'm sure that there's going to be fan footage that circulates, and that's cool, like they did the previous week. But I think like we should be getting this on Netflix as well. Roman is 100% winning the Rumble next year. They will continue the story of, quote, who will he choose? Quote, whose title is he after? In the end, he will choose Punk, and that will be the night one main event. Night one main event, my friend. If it is Roman Reigns versus CM Punk for the World Heavyweight title, I think that's night two main event, if you ask me. That aside, I also agree with you. I think that they're setting up Roman Reigns to be the Royal Rumble winner. One of the things that I've said is that many of those guys that are like Pantheon, face of the company type of guys, Mount Rushmore type of guys like Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, John Cena, Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, all of those guys have won multiple Royal Rumbles. Roman Reigns has only won one. And that one Royal Rumble is one of the most tainted Royal Rumbles in history, where he got booed out of the goddamn building in 2015 in Philadelphia. I can't put it past WWE to want to rectify that, to give Roman Reigns yet another major accolade and give him the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. I know a lot of people have Sami Zayn as the favorite, but I think that the whole Sami Zayn saga will most likely pay off in Saudi WrestleMania as opposed to Saudi Royal Rumble. And if he does win the Royal Rumble, I reckon that he's going to be picking CM Punk. I would agree with you there. With Ivy Nile returning tonight, I'm going to cross my fingers that this means that the Creed brothers are also returning with her. So no mention at all of the Creed brothers, and she is not in American-made colors, so it's possible that she is not going to be part of the Creed brothers. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what her being with the Creed brothers really does anymore for either the Creed brothers or Ivy Nile, especially now that there is a Women's Intercontinental Championship picture. I could totally see a world where Ivy Nile completely goes off on her own to chase the Intercontinental Championship without the Creed brothers being there, without Chad Gable, because if you need to rely on the other people to be there, if one of those people gets injured, like Chad Gable, it kind of fucks everything up, and it forces everything to go on the back burner like it's done here with the Creed brothers and Ivy Nile. I kind of would prefer Ivy Nile at this point to go off on her own, so that she isn't dependent on the popularity or the health of anybody else in her group. The women's War Games has now become the Becky versus AJ match, and quite frankly, they don't belong in this match and should have had a one-on-one match and had War Games be 4-on-4. For those that don't know, War Games did used to be traditionally 4-on-4, so that is what David here is hinting towards. I get your frustration, David. It does feel like the only real feud in this match is the AJ Lee and Becky Lynch feud. Everything else just sort of feels like, hey, we're going to put together an all-star roster of women's baby faces, and we're going to put them up against a bunch of heels that we're going to beat up because, you know, it's War Games. The only real narrative here is Becky Lynch and AJ Lee. To a degree, it kind of saves this War Games match to have them in here because it actually does give us a rivalry to follow as opposed to it just being a big exhibition match. But I totally get it. Like, if you wanted this to be a one-on-one match instead of them, frankly, from a story perspective, overshadowing the rest of the women on both the baby faces and the heels teams, I don't blame you. But I do think that adding AJ Lee and Becky Lynch does serve a major purpose. Like I said, it gives the War Games match an actual narrative and an actual feud to piggyback off of. But two, it also gives us the ability to be able to easily build towards a bigger stage for Becky Lynch versus AJ Lee. That stage either being Elimination Chamber in Chicago or, of course, WrestleMania. Where are the women's matches? I don't know. There wasn't a single women's match on Friday Night SmackDown. There wasn't a single women's match on this episode of Monday Night Raw. I don't know what's going on. I really don't know what the excuse is here. I get it. The women got some time to build their War Games match. But like, dude, like you have 5 women feuding with one another, a total of 10 women. You can't make like a singles women's match here. You can't do, I don't know, like Charlotte Flair versus Lash Legend just as a preview match to War Games. They could have easily done something. And I do think it's kind of a bummer that we've now gone 2 episodes of WWE programming, 5 hours of WWE programming without a single women's match. What in the Vince McMahon was this? This had a lot of people talking. We had mini John Cena going out there. I think this was a callback to when Kurt Angle was feuding with John Cena and he had a mini Kurt Angle go out there and put him in an ankle lock while he was cosplaying as Doctor of Thugonomics John Cena. I might be overthinking that, but I like to think that it's a callback towards that. The big talking point is that this does sort of feel like humor from a bygone era, which is why this person is saying, what in the Vince McMahon? And it's not just this person saying it, like this is a big narrative happening across all of social media, that this kind of did feel like a little bit of a Vince McMahon booked segment. Let me break this down without, trying to voice the Twitter mob and being like clutching my pearls. I'm offended by this, because I'm not. I want to break it down to you and explain to you why I simply don't think that this segment worked for its intended purpose. I do think it was entertaining. I was laughing. I thought it was cool. Psycho from Micro Wrestling is the guy that played John Cena, and I thought it was genuinely hilarious and meta to see cameraman Stu filming John Cena doing his entrance. That to me was hilarious. Like, from an entertainment standpoint, I was thoroughly entertained. But for the purposes of building towards the Survivor Series War Games match, I actually think that this failed, because the purpose of this is to give Dominic Mysterio more heat, to make him an even more dastardly human being going into War Games, and I simply don't think that that hit the mark at all whatsoever. The only person that came out looking better than they did going in was Psycho, the guy that played mini John Cena, because he looked like $1 million, cut a decent promo, and he took a 619 flush in the face without even having to put his arms up and sold it like $1 million. But Dominic Mysterio, I don't think that this did anything for him. I think that part of the problem with this segment was how flat the crowd was for this segment, because I feel like the crowd didn't know how to react to this in 2025. Like, they were nervous to cheer, to boo, to laugh. I feel like they just didn't know how they were supposed to react in this current climate to mini John Cena. Again, though, that aside, I just don't think that it served the purpose of elevating Dominic Mysterio going into this match at Survivor Series War Games against John Cena. So from that perspective, I don't think that it was a successful segment, but from an entertaining standpoint, I think it was entertaining. Again, huge shout out to Psycho. I love Micro Wrestling. I love Micro Wrestling roll call videos. I think that they are such a cool organization that gives them an opportunity to be able to showcase themselves as professional wrestlers, as opposed to like circus acts. And that was kind of the problem with the Vince McMahon era, where they did book people like Psycho to be kind of like circus acts at the end of the day. Seeing as we're not going to be getting Sheamus versus Gunther anytime soon, at least there is hope for Rusev versus Gunther, or maybe I'm just dreaming at this point. Obviously, when you look at this bracket here, it has me nervous that the possibility of Solo Sikoa versus Jey Uso is there, and that Gunther versus Jey Uso is a possibility. When you mention Rusev versus Gunther, I actually think that based on all these injuries, that's the best available final, because it makes the final heel versus heel, so that we know that a heel is going to go face off against John Cena, because I am expecting a heel to win this tournament to give us that heel versus face dynamic that John Cena has basically made super famous throughout his life. And if you were to do babyface versus heel in the final, you kind of just are going to assume that heel is going to win. Now, if you do heel versus heel, one with a tremendous amount of history with John Cena and Rusev, and one that seems to be the hand-picked chosen one to win this in Gunther, it might actually make things a little bit more interesting and a lot less easy to predict. So yeah, based on how the current tournament has shaped out with Penta and Sheamus's injuries, I would rather it end with Gunther versus Rusev. Roman Reigns doesn't need to be world champion in 2026. If he's just going to hold the title hostage and do part-time work, no thanks. I do think that there's still obviously like a lot of bitter feelings about Roman Reigns' 1,316-day reign as champion, where a huge portion of that was as a part-time champion. But if they were to give him the championship, I do think that WWE would have at least the wherewithal to recognize that they can't give him a long championship reign, that it might be 1 or 2 PLE cycles at most, so that they can have an actual active champion on a regular basis. I will say, I like the idea of Roman Reigns going after and maybe even winning the World Heavyweight Championship, because it would kind of help make amends for when Roman Reigns called the World Heavyweight Championship the loser's title, because that title has never been able to shake that stigma ever since Roman Reigns called it that. So to have Roman Reigns go after it and win it, I do think it kind of serves as almost an apology to that world title, and it will help the prestige significantly of that title moving forward. I see no difference. Yes, the Brockmaster. This man is in his 50s and still continues to put on banger matches. On top of that, he's in the best shape of his life. Like how? Yeah, this man is a timeless gem. Seeing his match against JD McDonough was great. His 6-man tag match performance was great. It does make me wonder, like, why does this man from San Diego, arguably the most legendary superstar to come out of San Diego, why does he not have a match at Survivor Series War Games when it's in San Diego? I do think he's going to make an appearance. I wouldn't be surprised if he helps John Cena defeat Dominic Mysterio. But if you really want like a perfect picture, perfect fantasy booking, I think it'd be cool if John Cena were to beat Dominic, and then in the back, John Cena and Rey Mysterio have a moment, and then Rey Mysterio challenges John Cena for a match that very same night for the Intercontinental Championship, doing a nice little full circle loop on everything that happened in 2011 while giving us Rey Mysterio having a match in San Diego and maybe even winning the Intercontinental title. All right, folks, thank you so much for watching this episode of Hot Takes. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for your submissions. Take care. Goodbye. Get out of here.